Okay, so you are?
Debra Willis.
And so you have a really interesting story about Michael.
Yes.
You want to tell us about it?
I met Michael in 1998 in New York City. I was doing security, and he came in to shop, apparently for his kids because he was looking at toys.
And where were you doing security?
In a toy store on Miracle Avenue and 34th Street. And
let me just move the camera a little bit higher. Okay.
no, you're not recording yet, are you?
Okay, actually I am recording. Yeah. It's all good.
Okay.
Yeah, wait, just a headshot.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
You look very nice, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he come in to, like I said, shop for.
Tell me.
I tell you. Okay. Come in to shop for his kids, and they had told him that I was going to be the follower person, along with his people, and
who had told you that? His people.
the supervisor.
Okay.
Oh no, supervisor of this company, and we went up several aisles where we come to the one that had Furby.
Had what?
Furby. He used to be a little, like a little animal that jiggled and jumped and made eye movements. And
what year was this?
1998. And he apparently didn't know how to work it or whatever. He kept looking at it, turning it. So I said, "May I?" And I took it, and and when it jiggled and jumped, it scared him. He kind of jumped, and he giggled, which was great. And I giggled. It was all I could do to hold it in beforehand when I went to go show him how it worked. So after that, he asked for my contact information, and
Well, he just enjoyed hanging with you?
he did for an hour and a half.
What were you talking about for the hour and a half?
We talked. My oldest son at the time was in the Hospital of Joint Diseases. He had had spine surgery. Just a year before that, he was diagnosed with kyphosis and scoliosis of the spine. And
was that in New York?
he was diagnosed in North Carolina.
Gotcha.
But New York City was the only place that we could find that could fix him. So he had major surgery, and he was in intensive care. And some of the people had told Michael, I suppose, somebody had told him that my son was sick. The lady that was behind us, she said that, I got put on the thing to, follow him around or whatever. And she said her son is sick in the hospital. And he stopped everything and asked questions and why. And when I started talking, he said, "Apparently you're not from New York." And I said, "No." And he, and asked other questions about, the surgery and stuff like that, and would it work, and, and after that, we of course parted ways. He, kissed the top of my hand, my cheek. It was very, very wonderful, very loving. He said that, he would pray for my son. He said, make sure, everything's good. He apologized for not being able to go there and see him at that time. And he asked, had asked for my information, and I gave it to him. And then he said that he would be in contact, and that's all he said. And then December the 23rd.
How much later was this?
About 3 weeks. He called, and I answered the phone. It come up, unavailable, and he goes, "Hi," and I said, "Who's this?" And he goes, "Michael Jackson," and I hung up the phone. So I was like, sure. So he called. A few minutes went by. He called again, and he said, "I'm sorry." He said, I said hello again, and I said, this is, a joke. I thought it was crowded from work, and he
because you had told people at work that you saw him, or they knew that?
Well, oh no, they were there too. I mean, well, there was a few of us that was there, not the whole staff, but there was a lot of people that was there, and so.
So they kidded you about?
Oh yeah, they joked about it because he had kissed the top of my hand and the side of my cheek, and he basically said he would pray for my son, which I took to complete heart. And I was a fan when I was a kid, and up until like 14 years old, but at that time I was in my 30s, and not for no offense, I wasn't thinking of anybody, any celebrity or anything like that. And so it wasn't, I know a lot of people is going to be like, "Oh no," I just didn't look at it like that. And I think he saw that. And when he contacted me in December, we talked for a little bit. I told her.
You hung up on him the first time?
Oh yes, I'm sorry. I hung up on him the first time. A few minutes went by. Few minutes went by. He called again. I hung up again because I really thought it was the crowd from work. And then the third time, he's like, "Wait, it's really. How is your son?" Right then, that caught my attention, and I was like, "Oh wow!" I know my knees started shaking because I was like, "It really is him." And of course, I apologized, and he loved it. He thought it was great, but So we talked, and then I didn't hear from him again until like maybe February. I know it was around Valentine's Day because he actually sent flowers, and
to you or your son?
no, to me for Valentine's Day, and he thanked me for my friendship, and I thought it was wonderful, and then he would call sometimes like once a month, and he might go sometimes 2 months, and then as years went by.
When he called, what would he say?
Oh, we talked about everything. First he'd always inquire how my son was, because my son's recovery after he left the hospital, he went to a rehab center, and he went to the Rusk Rehabilitation Center, and where he had to learn how to walk, and yes, he had to learn how to walk all over, and he learned how to walk all over. He had to learn how to hold a spoon, a lot of things that we take for granted.
Really?
He had to learn how to do all over again.
Because of the cancer?
No, not cancer. He had kyphosis and scoliosis of the spine. Scoliosis is where your spine is at a like a S shape, and kyphosis is that hump. He had a small one develop in between his shoulder blades and like the middle of his back that made him at a lean forward a little bit. And he was only, at the time, he was only 11.
So then what happened?
And like I said, he would call sporadically, and we would talk, and I'd ask him how his kids were, and and stuff. And he always, when he'd come to New York, he would let me know where he was. I bought my mom from North Carolina to meet him, and this was when I didn't know at the time that. I guess he was a character for costumes. He used to dress up, and I hear that now, that he used to dress up, I guess all the time to do things. And he showed up to the hotel that we were staying at, and we had picked a time, and it was supposed to be 7:20, and it was like no 7:20 came, no Michael. 7:30 came, no Michael, and then a few minutes after that, there was the doorbell. And I looked out, and my mom's like, "Don't answer that door. You're in New York City, for goodness sakes." And I'm like, "I'm not." So I looked out, and I seen a man outside. So I was like, "Can I help you?" And he's like, he didn't say anything. And then I was like, Mom goes, "Don't open that door. Don't open that door." And then my phone rings, and it was his security. And he told me, he said, "Mr. Jackson would like to come in." And I was like, "Are you?" I was shocked. Because I looked again, and I just couldn't believe my eyes. I mean, this was literally an old man that had like gray white hair on the side, these round glasses that were gold, and like a little mustache, and it was crazy. But when you looked at him, you could tell the eyes was him. But that's all. That's all. And when he walked in, I introduced him to my mother, and she goes, "You don't look anything like your pictures at all, young man." And they hit it off right then and there. It was I don't know, it was crazy. But so when he would come to New York after that, we would meet up and stuff. My mom had an aunt that lived in New York. She lived was Co-op City. I think it was called, Co-op City. And sometimes he would meet there. There was a couple times he brought the kids. They were little. And my mom met Paris, and she had a cough. And she doctored her cough in the hour that he was there with honey and sugar.
How old was Paris then?
Like maybe maybe 3 or 4 years old. Not very old. And Michael said that he had tried everything, but he could not. He couldn't cure it. And my mom said it's just an irritating cough, and she went over and she put it together, heated it up, and told her it was candy because she seen her when she put sugar in it. And she did it, and it wasn't half an hour after that he was, but she was there, and she was over and over. I mean, us parents, when you...
Did he seem to be a good parent?
He was wonderful. He was He was, I guess the word you would call it is, if you had to say he was a doting dad, it'd be like doting times 20, times 1,000. I mean, he was wonderful. He was wonderful. And at that time, it was just Prince and Paris. So.
And then what else?
Well, time went on, when I could see him. He went to Virginia one time, and we met up there for a little while. Sometimes when he was in New York, he would be there for a couple days. There was one time in particular in July of 2002. He was actually there for 3 whole days. And me and my mom, well, I was already there, but me and my mom went. And we spent some time with him and stuff for those 3 days.
Where was that? Where did you spend time?
Oh, well, first of all, at the plaza, because that's where my mom was at. And then we went to her aunt's house.
Huh. Did you ever go to Michael's place in New York?
Most of the time it was in hotels or, stuff like that, or he would come to us. But there was only one time that I went to his downtown apartment. Oh, I call it an apartment.
Where was that?
On the east side. And it was just, it was so quick. I mean, I used to take a taxi everywhere, because I never drove in New York City. But I would drive in the Bronx, or drive like to Co-op City or something like that. But I certainly didn't want to drive in Manhattan. Driving in Manhattan is like driving here. Didn't work for me.
Well, what type of things would you talk about with Michael?
We talked about everything. I mean, there was nothing ever...
Like what, for example?
We talked about kids. We talked about toys, parks, vacations, trips, how parents get together and they take their kids on vacation, or they'll take them hiking and stuff like that. And he always said that he would love to be able to take his kids and be out with them for a week and, start a campfire, roast marshmallows, and stuff like that. He dreamed of that all the time. But he said, unfortunately, they would never know what that was.
Well, why do you think he particularly liked you? Just because you're an average person?
I think because of when he approached me, in 98, my son was really sick and he had just been operated on. And it was one of those life or death situations because his chest cavity was closing in around his heart. So it was making it very hard to breathe. It was a very 17-hour surgery, very long and very dangerous. So most people, I guess would say, oh my God, that's Michael Jackson. He's coming to, in the store or this, that, and the other. And they would like lose their mind. I understand that. But I wasn't nowhere near like that. I had too much other stuff going on. And when we started talking, I don't know how to explain it. It's like sitting this close to him. You just felt like somebody took a comforter and just wrapped it around you. It was nothing that you couldn't talk about that he didn't understand. Nothing at all. And mostly, we talked about our children and, and what aspects of life we had for them and what we, wished for them in the future and stuff like that. And we talked about, other things. We talked, just a little about his music. We didn't get into the entertainment, the show business, and stuff like that. It wasn't that kind of friendship. It just never happened like that. We talked about who we liked in music, He pulled a really good one on me one time, but I got him back, but he pulled a good one on me.
What was that?
We were at the Waldorf Astoria, and he was there, and I had made a mistake, and we were talking about who we liked and singers and stuff like that, and I told him that I had always had a heart for Barry Gibb, and one of the Bee Gees, one of the Bee Gees for people who don't know who the Bee Gees are or maybe don't know who Barry Gibb is, and I was there for a couple hours or so. And he goes over and, he's looking at this pad and he takes the phone and he makes this call. And he's talking and I'm over, like kind of a good distance, in this penthouse suite, whatever you call it. And he goes like this, motion me over. And he gives me the phone and he says, say hello. And I'm like, who is it? Nobody, nobody knows I'm here. My mom or her aunt or something, And I answer the phone and I hear this like heavenly British accent, how are you? And I'm like, I'm fine. And he goes, so I hear that you really like my music. And I mean, everything in me, it was like mush. And I looked over at him and I gave him the death stare because I just couldn't fathom that he would do that to me. And of course, I only talked for like, maybe less than 5 minutes, but it was wonderful to have that happen because ever since I was a little girl, like 9 years old, I loved the Bee Gees. And he made that possible.
That's nice.
Yeah.
What other Michael stories do you have?
He had an interview one time. It was sort of kind of like a real short, not too long one. And I told him, I said, well, I'll go. He's, no, stay. So I'm like, okay, I'm going over here. And I was sitting there and I had packages of candy. And he was talking to this guy. I remember the guy's name was Steve. I don't remember who he was, where he was from or something. And he had, this pad that he was writing on. And he seen me, do like this, and he'd look over and he'd smile and he'd, see me, eating them. So I guess curiosity got the best, and he goes, what is that? And I said, it's candy. And I said, he goes, give me some. And I'm like, no. He's like, he goes, I love candy. I'm like, well, that's good. This is mine. And then, he stops right in the middle of this interview with this guy. And this guy's like smiling, and kind of like, joking under, his breath. And I'm like, no. So he gets done with this guy, and this guy's still in there, and he's writing on this pad. And he goes, give me some. So I poured some in his hand, and he throws them in his mouth like this. It was Pop Rocks, the candy that when you put it in your mouth, it explodes. And it was grape flavor. And the action on the reaction on his face was priceless. And this guy over here in the table, in the section over there, he felt it. He couldn't hold it in no more. He thought that was just the most perfect prank ever. And it was my way of getting him back for before when he had called Barry Gibb, and I wasn't prepared for that at all. So
was he kind of childlike or mature or both?
Most of the time he was childlike because he liked to play. He loved to play jokes on people.
Yeah.
But he didn't like it so much when people got him back, especially when it was unexpected, right? But he would, I don't know, it all depends on what the conversation was, depending on, what was being talked about. I know he was very emotional, and he didn't like, when anybody, he said that there was no kid in this world that should have to go to bed hungry. And when we talked about that, his whole demeanor would change. But he never wanted to see a child hurt. Never wanted to have a child go hungry or anything like that. And he said that he has tried everything in his power in different places he had been. And he said, and I've been so many places to keep from that happening. If I was to describe Michael in one word, it would have to be phenomenal in the aspect of caring about the world and just giving everything he had. That's how I see him. That's how I saw him as a friend. I didn't dote over him. I treated him no different than I've treated any other friend that I've ever had in my life.
How many times did you see him over, like 5 or 10 times?
If I had to count, probably anywhere between 10, 11 times. I saw him. Even some of them was only 2 or 3 hours.
A period from when to when?
From 1998 is when we met. Then I saw him again in November, June, and right after Valentine's Day in '99, and then 2000. I saw him once, but it was only for just a few hours. And then, time went by, and then there was like 6 months, I think I went, was the longest that I didn't have any, didn't see him.
When was the last time you saw him?
The last time I saw him was March of 2009. Now, I saw him every year, sometimes, you know, once, sometimes twice. It all depended on what was going on. But as far as the last time of physically being face to face was March of 2009.
Was he married at any of those periods, or what was his relationships?
He wasn't in any relationship in 1998 when I met him. This was after, you know, talking to him when he called back, and then sending flowers, and, you know, in 99, and then talking to him. If he was, he never said. But I had joked with him about being a single mom, and he goes, yeah, he you know, he related to that. So apparently,
Because he was a single dad?
I would think that. I mean, he never precisely said, you know, because I don't have a wife, or you know, he didn't say I have a girlfriend. He just said I can relate to that. So I took that as he was a single dad.
You said something that, what did he say about Neverland after he dies, or?
In March of 2009, we talked about it, but in 2007, Michael told me that he wanted to take Neverland and turn it into what Danny Thomas had left, which is St. Jude's Children's Hospital, you know, for anybody that doesn't know that, and it's in Memphis, Tennessee. And he said that he wouldn't be a part of it. You know, he's not going to live there, and he's not going to be a part of it, but he wanted to be the total backer of having that property used for children who had terminally ill diseases. Because he you know, he joked with me, well, I thought he was joking, but because I've been in healthcare for 31 years, he said, you can come and take care of them, you know, and he could get to enjoy to see the end results. And that's what he always told me that he wanted to do.
He kind of appreciated you partly because you're in healthcare. Is that right, do you think?
He loved the occupation that I had because it was about caring for people. And my specialty is dementia and Alzheimer's care. And I've had some terminally ill children, you know, in over the years. Sorry, gnats,
Sorry.
or whatever they are. But yeah, I mean, we enjoyed, like, just conversations, you know. When my son was little, my youngest son, he would call, and sometimes he would be up, and he would sing to him, "You Are My Sunshine," on the phone.
Really?
Yeah. And I mean, it was just, and he, you know, was little, but apparently he remembered it because when he graduated from his like kindergarten school type place to go into first grade, they wanted them to do something, like if they played the piano, or if they, you know, could do a hula hoop or something. And he picked to sing. So to his class, he sang "You Are My Sunshine."
Did he mention if he had other friends like you, of just kind of everyday people?
He had, I know that there was a couple in, I think it was Tennessee, and those people were the ones who told him that he had talked to them about Neverland, you know, and he had told them the same thing that he told me. The lady's name was Peggy, but I don't remember the husband's name. But there was a couple there. There was a couple in Virginia. I think there were several people like me. But you know, he told me one time, he said, if you tell everybody, you know, that we're friends, he said, you'll never see any peace. And he told me, I love my fans. And he said, but if you tell, you know, you go around and you say, you know, Michael Jackson's my personal friend, he said, first of all, they're going to look at you like you're crazy, which, no offense, is true most of the time. He goes, and they'll want an autograph, or they'll want to meet me. And he goes, so best is to keep it casual and, you know, and on the download, basically. And I did. And I had a wonderful decade and a month, you know, or a few months.
Did he ever mention any of the, like, accusations by kids against him, or any of the legal stuff?
There was a few times that we had conversations. He told me about Gavin, and he said that one night he was, you know, sitting down and, you know, and not really sitting down and just doing something, relaxing or whatever. And the boy came in and wanted to know if he could talk to him. And he sat down and he told him, he said, I need some help. I'm confused. And he told him that he was confused on if he liked, boys or girls. And Michael cut him right off and told him, he said, that's something you need to talk to your parents about. And he goes, well, I don't think they'll understand. And it really bothered him because, his kids are little, so he didn't have that to worry about just yet. For us parents who have kids that, that are, 11, 12 years old, then, we worry about things like that. And we fight how we're going to tell them about the birds and the bees and, and stuff. But he said, he told him, he said, you need to discuss that with your parents. And he said it made him feel really bad that he couldn't help him, but he really didn't know how. He didn't think it was his place.
Did you know, Michael, when Gavin made his accusations?
Yes. Yes.
And did he say anything about that?
He just said that he couldn't believe that anybody that would want to hurt, would, break his heart, tear him apart like that. He just didn't understand it for the world. He had, I had gone to Los Alifas for 3 days, and I was, there 3 days before the trial started. I was there the 7th, 8th, and 9th, and it was just a couple of days or so before the trial basically ended. And he came every evening and sit with me, and we talked. He'd mostly, drink hot tea or, or water. But and we would.
Were you staying in Los Olivos or?
Yes,
Solvang?
yes, and Solvang is where the place was where he had set it up for me to go. And
Oh, he set it up for you to go?
oh yeah, that was set up because I was asked. Usually before, if I was in New York and he was going to come there, he would call me, say this is where I'm going to be. But this time I was called and asked, and he sit there with me and he said, I don't know how the world can be that cruel to believe that I could do such a thing. He said, all I've wanted to do is make a difference. And I mean, he would put his head down and he would just shake it. And then when he looked back up, you could see it. He was crushed. And what do you do? What do? Come here, come here, let me hug you. You get numb, not because of who he was, but how do you can't do nothing but be there.
He was so misunderstood.
Yeah. I mean, because he goes, the thought of, that has never crossed my mind, ever. And he goes, how can anybody, it doesn't matter all the stuff I've ever done. He goes, I give charity. If I could get out there and do work, I would do that. He said, but I can't, and everybody knows why. I just don't have it that easy. I can't even take my kids, to outside to play, outside of these gates. And he goes, how can anybody think that I would do such a thing? And I say that my personal opinion as a friend, I say that his heart and his spirit broke then. And it was never repaired. That's my own opinion. I mean, I've never had anybody, tell me that that's how they feel, and I agree with them. That's my personal opinion of what I saw. I saw a man that was completely destroyed and broken apart with accusations that had been put against him.
Would he drink wine and such?
I seen him drink 1 glass of wine.
So he wasn't a big drunk.
No.
He just kind of a regular.
I never seen him drink but 1 glass of wine. I've seen him drink water, seen him drink hot tea, never seen him smoke a cigarette, never seen him do any drugs except 2 Tylenol. I seen him take 2 Tylenol after dinner. And that was it. That was it. And that's the God's honest truth. I have never seen the man do any kind of drug.
What do you think about Conrad Murray and all that?
I think that there's not a hole deep enough to bury that man in, to be honest. I know he's a liar. I think that he abused his power. And I know that I know that he had help doing that. And I don't think a 4-year sentence was nearly enough. And I just don't think it. I mean, I know what I think. It's not right to say what I truly think because that's not the way God would want me to be. But it's just not a hole deep enough. It's the only way I can say it.
The way I saw it, and I don't know, is that Michael was so devastated by all the Gavin Arvizo stuff and all that.
He carried it.
That he just had a hard time sleeping and had Conrad Murray help him to sleep, but Conrad Murray just wasn't responsible about it.
Right.
Is that how you see it?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
I think he abused the power he had as a doctor, a power that he had of being a friend. He calls himself, I read one time, somebody that cared deeply. No. You don't care deeply and try to, watch somebody supposedly, do all this stuff that he said that Michael did. Yeah, I've seen one interview one time where he talked to Dr. Oz. I used to love to watch Dr. Oz. He was so health conscientious and, wanted people to do well and eat well and live well. And I stopped watching him after he did the interview with Conrad Murray. I know they do it for ratings and stuff like that, but there's a time that you have to be a little bit more respectful. And the things that I heard out of that man's mouth was complete lies. Just completely. That's not a friend. That's not a friend. That's a friend looking for 15 minutes, 10 minutes of fame or whatever they say, but that's not a friend. A friend doesn't do another friend like that.
Yeah.
If he was that bad off and needed that much help, but he could go on a talk show and tell it, but there's no word out there where he tried to tell anybody else. This is, Michael's really bad off. I really can't help him. I need some help, people. You never heard that rumor. You never heard that. But after the fact, oh, he's this and he's that, and I saw this and I saw that. That's not a friend. And that's what he claims to be.
How did you know of me? You saw the video?
Yes.
And then you wrote me a letter?
Yes, I did.
Describe that?
I don't watch a lot of interviews and stuff like that because I know that it's, just crazy. I've seen, some things in the past and sit there and shake my head and go, yeah, okay. When I seen yours, it was, I didn't know what it was about, at first. And I watched it. And I thought to myself, finally, thank God, somebody has told the truth. Somebody has showed this man, my friend, what he's really like. Yeah, he's a child at heart, For whatever reason, he's a child at heart. I mean, hell, I'm a child at heart, Physically, I can't be a child, at heart with my kids or my kid now. But that's all, and you showed that. And it was beautiful. And it didn't dwell on the past. And it didn't dwell on what somebody else said. It just talked about him and showed the way he was. And that's what everybody should do. If you don't know what you're talking about, don't put it on a video. Don't pretend that you know him if you don't know him. People who write these, no offense to some, people who has wrote books. And every book, from what I understand, videos, from what I've heard, it all talks about the past. You showed decency. You showed respect. And I like that. So I wrote you a letter, and I told you I was his friend, and that if I came to LA, I asked you if you would have coffee with me. And you said you would be, you wrote me back, and you said you would be delighted. to have coffee with me. And you wrote me a letter. You didn't send me an email or text message. You wrote me a letter, and you sent me a copy of that video. And I thought it was immaculate. If I had to describe that in one word, I'd say immaculate. And that's the way that people should look at Michael. Michael wasn't a bad person. Michael didn't do wrong. There was times that we talked about, when we were kids, what happened. What happened to us when we were little is against the law today. Back when we were, small, 9, 10 years old, 6 years old, 11 years old, it wasn't against the law. You
like his father.
Yeah, you could beat the hell out of your kid, and it would, or spank them with a belt, or make them kneel on rice or whatever, and nobody said anything. Your neighbors might hear you cry and scream and beg for mercy, but they just close the door and close the blinds. Nowadays, people listen, but that's what it was, and he did have it rough, and there was a couple of them that have it rough. I have no reason not to believe that. Because I grew up in that era, and I got myself tore up too, for little things. It could be the smallest thing. And a lot of people say, well, why did you do that? What kind of parents did you have? Well, I know what kind of parents Michael had, but, just hearing him talk about his mother and hearing him talk about a situation like that, because we were just comparing. And, but I know what kind of parents I had. My parents divorced when I was 12, and I stayed with my mom, and then my grandma, my dad's mom raised me right on up until I left home.
Did Michael talk about his father at all?
He talked about him some. Just a little bit. Basically, he was a good man, but he just was too strict, and he just didn't know when to stop.
And Michael was particularly sensitive, I guess.
He was very sensitive. He didn't want to be hurt. He didn't want to be tormented. There was times that he would try to do good for people, and he didn't understand the reaction that he would get so suddenly. He had that with fans too. There was fans that he would try to, be good to and invite them in places, and stuff, and they just went just a little different than what he expected. And it didn't scare him, but it kind of feared him of some of the actions that they responded, the way they responded. It was just casual. We talked, like I said, there was nothing ever off limits. We laughed, we played. My mom played cards with him, like solitaire. She would start out with solitaire, and he'd be looking over her shoulder. She shared face cream secrets with him. Seeing him in a do-rag with my mom's face cream on, that is just a vision. That is just a vision that you can't get out your head.
That's funny.
And when my mom passed away, unfortunately, in 2008, and Michael was right there. The closest and the best that he could be, he was right there.
Really? He called you then?
Well, I had to call him.
Let him know.
my mom wasn't famous, so it wasn't, it was, yeah, I didn't read it in the papers, or, there was no social media that really cared. But I called him and let him know, and the next day he was there, just like that.
When you say there, he was on the phone? Or?
No, he was there in person.
He came?
The closest that he could get.
Oh.
And
where was that?
he came to Raleigh, North Carolina. It was only 2.5 hours from me, and that's where he was at just for the whole day. Nice. Just wanted to make sure that his friend was okay, and and just explain to me that he had loss in his life, and he knew how I felt. And he was like that. He was a beautiful, caring, unique individual. And when I say unique, I mean because of the passion that he had for people, the love he had for people. People could be wrong, and he would find a way to see through that in some cases. It could be things that would take you and I and make us, completely pass out from. And he would find some kind of good in that and say, well, I see it like this. there was many times that I talked to Michael in situations and stuff, and he would tell me his theory on it, and I would roll with that, and things worked out better.
It's kind of a positive look on things.
Yep, yep. Instead of looking at it so negative, and there's quite a few people who know that when I got something to say, I just say it, and a lot of times, my grandmother used to have this saying: if you don't want your feelings hurt, don't wear them on your sleeve. But that don't quite work for everybody.
Do you have any thoughts about Michael's kids now?
I think his kids are wonderful. I met his kids. Well, I met 2 of his kids in 2001 for the first time, and they probably don't remember me. I mean, I don't know. Prince was 4, Paris was 3, Blanket wasn't, in the picture yet. And I had a bottle of bubbles, great big bubbles like this, the bubbles that you blow. Me and her went through a whole bottle of these bubbles.
You and Paris?
Me and Paris. And she loved to play with the little toy cars, like little boy cars, Matchbox, I would call them. I don't exactly remember. They came in a package, and there was like 6 of them, and she'd do them all over the table and stuff. And I watched Pete the Magic Dragon with Prince, and stuff. And it was just for like 3 or 4 hours, but it was wonderful. And he would interact, and stuff, and he would get right down and play with the cars, on the table with her or the floor, and I remember when Prince was watching when Pete the Magic Dragon, he would laugh. He had this little giggle, and it was so much like when Michael would giggle. And I'm thinking to myself, that's just phenomenal how they interact like that. And there was times that he would lay down right with him and get in a position like this, or something like that. And you would look over and you'd look at Prince, and he'd be in the same position, and neither one of them didn't know it. So it was crazy to see stuff like that. Paris drew me a picture of a caterpillar that was green and orange, and she wrote her name the best she could, with I think it was a green or orange crayon, and I still have that.
Oh, you still have?
Yeah, the paper's kind of yellow and lost its, I guess whatever you call it, turned kind of like a little bit of yellow, but you could still see it perfectly, of course.
Oh, that's cool.
And I still have that.
That's cool. Have you ever been interviewed about your relationship with Michael other than this?
This will be the first time.
Really?
I've had people call me when his trial started. I reached out. Well, actually, let me go back. When Michael died, I was supposed to be here. I was supposed to leave my house. I had been June 23rd. Let me go back some more. June 23rd was the last time I actually talked to Michael on the phone of 2009. And he invited me here. Well, that would be
to L.A., you mean?
To L.A., yes. And to spend time, before he left for the tour. And he wanted me to meet his mother. And he told me, he said, we can do this together. And I told him, I said, well, you better be, prepared, because he put her on a pedestal that nobody could reach. And I said, it's going to be nervous for me. And he goes, you're not a nervous person. Oh, yes, I am. And I said, you better be strong, so you better eat good. I said, because if I pass out, you're going to have to carry me. And I'm a pretty big girl. So, I mean, he had his work cut out for him if that had happened. And he wanted to know if I would come out. So I made the decision to do it. There was a lot of times that I got invited to a lot of places that I couldn't go. I was a workaholic. My job wasn't just the kind you could just walk away from patients, or whoever you may have, and just do a lot of things. And, of course, he went a lot of places. And I told him, I said, okay, I'll do it. So I got ready and everything, and I was at work that day, and a friend of mine, Freddie was his name, he passed away a few years ago, called me and asked me where I was. And I told him that I was at work. And he goes, have you looked at the TV or anything? And I said, well, no, can't have it on here. And he goes, how much longer do you have? And I said, not long. I said, I'm getting ready to leave. And he goes, well, he said, I'm going to call you back. And I said, well, no, I mean, I'm packing up now. And he said, okay, I'll stay on the phone. And I'm like, what's up? And he's like, I just want to, want to stay on the phone with you and talk. And I'm like, okay. But he sounded sounded too serious. See, I told him, I said, is everything okay? I said, how's Julie? How's Sam? That's his daughter, and his girlfriend at the time. And he's like, just talk to me. And I said, okay. So I'm packing up my, my stuff, stethoscope and all that. And I said, okay, I'm walking out the door. And I said goodbye to my, my client, and the next girl came and took my place. I get in the car and he said, well, what is it, like 20 minutes to your house? And I said, well, it all depends on how you drive. And, he chuckled a little bit and he said, he kept asking, we'd talk about some, little things, and I said, oh, look, I got the radio now, I haven't heard the radio all day. I love music. And I hadn't heard the radio all day, didn't watch TV and stuff like that. And I pulled in the driveway and I said, okay, I'm getting out the car now. It's like I was telling him every move I was making. And when I got inside the door, he told me, he said, I just want you, and when I got inside the door, there was three suitcases. There was a big one, like what you would call the small one that you'd put over top of your head, and then a little one that you would be called like a personal item or whatever on a plane. And that's the way they were. But I was driving. That's how I was getting here. I was going to drive. And it was in the big suitcase. I had all the stuff for the kids. All the stuff that he had told me they liked. I remember I had a jean jacket made for Prince. I had the Rolling Stone emblem, like ironed on it and stuff. And just little things, little trinket things, we call them. And I put my bag down, and Freddie told me, he said, go sit on the couch. And I'm like, you're really bothering me. At this time, I'm getting kind of frustrated because I didn't know what was going on. And he goes, what channel do you listen to, on the TV and stuff? And I'm like, well, I don't know. He said, what's your news channel? I said, oh, yeah, we got CNN, we've got Fox, we've got CBS, we've got all these. And he goes, okay, just put it on something. And when I hit that TV to turn it on, it always came on Lifetime, which is like a movie channel. And I put it on, what the news channel was. And it ran across the bottom of the screen. Michael Jackson dead at 50. And I told him, and he goes, it's all right. And I said, yeah, it's all right. I said, it's just a hoax. I said, you know how many times he told me that he'd been hearing that he was dead? And he goes, sweetheart, it's not a hoax. And I said, yes, it is. I said, my bags are packed. They're at the door. I said, I'm supposed to be leaving tomorrow afternoon. And he said, sweetie, it's not a joke. I wouldn't do that to you. And he goes, you need to listen to me. And I said, nah, like that. And the more I sat there, the more it just kept rolling and rolling. And then I seen Jermaine come on there and pronounce it. And Larry, I don't remember nothing else. I don't remember anything else. I woke up in a puddle on the floor. At first I didn't know if I turned over something, if I'd spilled something or, whatever. And it was tears. And I'd been laying there for a couple hours, maybe more. It was dark. There was no light on. TV was still on. And that was it. I never made it. I never made it here. The one and only time that I got a chance to, other than the times in New York, to actually go and spend a good amount of time, meet the kids, possibly meet his mom, and all this stuff, joking with him, saying, you're going to have to carry me and all that. It all came back. It all came back, seeing him cry, before the trial, seeing him, just everything, seeing him play cards with my mom, seeing him with face cream on, seeing him spin. I seen him do the moonwalk until we'd been friends probably a good 6-7 years before I ever saw it for the first time. And picking on my mom, and my mom, he used to love my mom's shepherd pie. It all came back and hit me like a ton of bricks. I've never had a male friend like him ever, even though he was down to earth, and I treated him just like I did everybody else. But I've never felt like that. And I've lost people too. I lost my mom the year before, and my best friend October of the same year. And it's been 9 years. But I reached out 2 days later because of what we had talked about his doctor and other things.
You reached out to who?
I reached out first of all to a number that I have that was supposed to be at the Havenhurst house. And it, beep, 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 the number you've reached has been disconnected or no longer in service or whatever. And that number was really old, so it may or may not have been, the number, somebody else's number, but whose number it was, Michael said, you can reach me here if you ever need, to get a hold of me. And I tried to call that at first, got nothing. So I called the LAPD and I asked for who I would talk to. I told them who I was, and they put me on the phone with a Lieutenant Sanchez. And I told him who I was, and he goes, okay, he said, there's like 200 people a day calling this station. And I said, sir, please listen to me. And he told me that he would call me back. 2 years later, at that point in time, when I came here in 2011, in April, I still hadn't got that phone call back. And I tried everything in my power to find people that could get a message to his mom. Because I have things that Michael trusted in me and wanted me to do for him if he was ever in a situation to where he couldn't. And I'm not like the rest of these people. I'm not calling somebody to try to get fame and fortune or want anything. I don't want nothing but this amount of time, person to person, face to face with his mom. I just got something to give her. That's all I got. I don't need all day. I don't need a half a day. I don't even need an hour. I just need a complete promise. A promise that I made over 9 years ago. That's all. Just
the promise was
to give the stuff that he left for me to his mother. That's all. And nobody.
What stuff was that? Like the memories?
It was stuff, physical stuff that he left with me and wanted me to give to his mother. And
what type of stuff?
I can't tell you what kind of stuff. I just know, I can just tell you this. Part of it is something that has never been opened since he gave it to me. And the other part of it is just memories. Stuff to give her that will make her remember. And that's basically, honest to God, all I can tell you. And I've had more people try to say they're going to help me. And this is close people to this family. But I don't need to talk to the brothers or the sisters. I just need to talk to his mom. From a mother to a mother. Just for a few minutes. And just pass something to her. And I will be nothing but a memory to them. They ain't got to ever worry about talking to me ever again. But what I promised when I said I would do for him, I have tried for 8.5 years and can't get anybody to take me serious. I have had, if I'm allowed to say, I have had her assistant became really good friends with her, well, it's his family. It was Trent Jackson. He contacted me and said, how can I help you? And I told him, and I talked to him, and we emailed, and we text. He said, I'm going to help you. And he asked me the same question you did. Well, what kind of stuff do you have? Well, I can't tell you that. It's just, that's the way he wanted it done. And that's the way I'm going to do it. That's it. And he said, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I'd send stuff to the kids at the Calabasas house. I've got receipts that shows what I sent, when I sent it. I've got a receipt of Havenhurst where I sent stuff out there to try to get somebody. And the only pictures that I've got one more, but the 3 pictures that I had, I sent in a letter. It was a good 6 pages long, if that, maybe more, to his mother. And I had it person to person, how you can do it at the post office. And somebody by the name of J. Bennett signed that receipt, and it was sent back to me. And to this day, I have still not had anybody like her or somebody say, but Trent Jackson, he got all the gifts. He said he gave them to the kids. He sent me 3 airplane tickets, round trip tickets, for me and my 2 boys to go to Michael's December 3rd, 2011 opening premiere in Las Vegas. 3 airplane tickets. It was a surprise. He was in the car when I talked to Joe Jackson for the first time. I talked to Mr. Joe for a good half an hour on the phone. Told him all about meeting Michael, and he laughed and asked me if the bass was still biting. Apparently he loved to fish. I don't know when, but apparently one time he liked to fish. And he would say, "Is the bass still biting Carolinas?" And I said, "Yeah, come on down." I said, "I got a piece of property at Harker's Island." I said, "Best fishing in the world from what I understand." And he's like, "Well, I'd love to do that." He said, "I'd have to bring my security team with me." He said, "I don't think that would look it would be too noticeable," is what Mr. Jackson would say. So when I came in 2011, this was February, I spoke to him for the first time in 2011. And I came in April here. And I called him, and I left a message, and he called me back. And I told him that I was here, and I wanted to know, he goes, "Well, girl, what?" And I told him I had just come out of the courthouse. And he goes, "Well, why don't you go by the house?" And I laughed, and I said, "Yeah." I said, "I've got a birthday gift for Paris and got some stuff for the kids." And he goes, "Well, Katie's there. Take her to the house." And I said, "Well, I can't just go to you." He said, "Why can't you?" He said, "You go to the gate, and you tell him I'm your guest." And he had talked to me with Trent in the car. So I did exactly what he said. And to the gate we went. Talked to Nancy Navarro, I think is her name, if I say her last name right. She gave me a pass. I still have it. She said, "Put it in your window. This is what you do." I get up to the house, and these 2 guys come down.
This is Calabasas.
In Calabasas house. These 2 guys come down, African-American guys. The first guy was Michael Amir, and I know he was working for Michael. And the other guy, I don't remember who he was, or didn't catch his name. He may have said or whatever, but I knew Michael Amir right off because, and he said, "Ma'am," he said, you can't, I was told you can't be here." And I said, "Well, I've got permission from Mr. Jackson, Joe Jackson, to come here." And he goes, "Ma'am, I'm just telling you what I was told." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Can you take this and you give this to," it was a bag. I said, "Can you take this and give this to Miss Catherine or, Paris?" I said, "It's a birthday gift," because her birthday was the next day. And he said, "Yes, ma'am." He said, "I'll make sure that, they get it." And I left, and I was devastated. I'd never been so hurt in my life. I mean, I was literally told to leave. And Trent called me like 5 minutes, and he was so rude. He said, "Who in the hell do you think you are? What in the hell do you think you're doing?" And I said, "Whoa, wait," and I'm trying to say this through tears and I was devastated. And I said, "Mr. Joe Jackson told me to come here." And he goes, "My uncle don't live here. Mr. Jackson don't live here. He don't make the rules here. I do." What was I supposed to say to that? I don't know who makes the rules there. I was just following what he asked me to do. So we left. We went back to the house where I was staying at, and later that evening we went out to the Grove. And I was in a store called Justice. It's like a little girl store. And my phone rang, and I had, Mr. Jackson's number in there under, Mr. Joe. And I answered, and I said, "Hello," and he goes, "Debra?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "This is Joe Jackson." I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "I am so sorry about what happened." And he goes, "Can you tell me what happened?" And I told him. And he said, "I bet you it doesn't happen again." And he told me, he said, "You can come back." I said, "No, sir. No, sir." I said, "Not as long as he's there." And then I told him, I said, I talked to you on the phone through him, right?" And he goes, "Yes, ma'am. I got emails. I sent stuff to that house. I got plane tickets to go to Vegas. I got sent 2 coffee table books of Never Can Say Goodbye. These big, big books like this. Got 2 of them. And when you open them up on the inside, it's like a dedication to me and to my son, thanking me for being Michael's friend, thanking me for the time we shared together, thanking me for how I cared about her son. In my oldest son's book, she said, "John," thanking him for, being a friend and saying, "I've been talking to your mother on the phone and I think she's a wonderful person and I'm glad that Michael had her in his life." Well, Mr. Larry, I've never spoken to Catherine Jackson on the phone. So right there, and not for nothing, there is no truth to that. And I could sit here and say, yes, it came from her. But everybody that I've reached out to like that, they say they want to help me, but then it goes dry. Because I don't want to tell them what I have for her. That was the deal that was made.
Do you still have it?
Yes, sir, I do.
I wonder if I can try to reach out to, would you want me to try to reach out to Tom Hamilton to ask Paris about giving it to her?
I just want to meet Miss Jackson. 30 minutes. I want to give her what I have, give her a little message that I've got, and that's it. And what I promised is filled. That's all. Brian Oxman said he was going to help me because he was Joe Jackson's lawyer when I reached out to LAPD, and Lieutenant Sanchez asked me if I knew who the lawyers were. How do I know who anybody's lawyer is? I don't live in LA. I don't live in California.
And did Michael's lawyers contact you about being a witness?
I had lawyers come to my house in North Carolina when it was the wrongful death case that Miss Jackson had.
Oh, interesting.
Took out, yes. And I talked when Michael's trial was going on with Conrad Murray. I was contacted and gave an interview over the phone with a gentleman for the LAPD for the homicide division. I think Mr. Joe may have had something to do with that. I'm not sure, because I told him if there was any way I could help, to let me know. It was just a couple of days later this man called me. I was a little leery at first, but he proved to me real quick that, he was who he said he was and calling from where he said he was calling from. And I told him, I said, "Well, I'll tell you what," I said, "I'll call you back. Let me have your number." And when I called him back, the dispatch, answered. And I could tell right then that he, who's going to go in the police department and, make a fake call and, what I'm saying, and me call back and they say, I assume it could be done. We all watch TV, sometimes, but that's how it happened.
What would you have said in the wrongful death case?
I would have said exactly what me and Michael had talked about a couple months before he passed away.
Which was?
He told me how he was treated. He told me things that he, was going on with him. He didn't trust that doctor. He really didn't want him there, but he said he didn't have a choice.
Really?
And I told him, I said, "Well, if you don't like him, why don't you get rid of him?" He said, "I can't do that." I was on the phone with him one night when Conrad Murray came knocking, and he laid down the phone or maybe put it on his chest. I don't know. And he come in and they were having a discussion back and forth. And I heard Michael say, I don't need anything. I'm fine. I don't need anything tonight. You can go if you want, or whatever." And he goes, "Well, we've talked about this several times." And I heard and when Michael got back on the phone, he was so upset. And I told him, I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "He always tries to push me to do these crazy things." And I'm like, "Well, what things?"
Conrad Murray?
Yeah. And I said, "Well, what things?" He said, "He always wants me to take this or take that and tell me I need to rest more and stuff." And he said, "No, I don't like none of it." And then he told me, he said, I've been having pains in my chest for days. He said, like a burning sensation. And I'm like, well, what is it from? And he said, when I leave evenings, he said, to go to rehearsal, he said, he gives me medicine. I said, well, what does he give you? And he goes, I don't know. He said, but I know I don't feel right. He said, and it interferes with a lot of things. And I said, well, is there any way you could find out what it is? And he said, he tells me, don't worry about it. It's for my own good. When I checked into it later, when he's telling me, it's Ambien. If anybody knows what Ambien is, it's a sleep medication. And if you take it in the daytime and you don't go to sleep, it can make you viciously ill and sick. And it can cause other problems. If you don't have to take it, you shouldn't, because it's one of the strongest medicines on the market. And then he told him, he said, I told him about the pains in my chest. He goes, and he told me, don't worry about it. And I said, he's a doctor. Why would he tell you not to worry about it? And he goes, I don't know. And I said, you need a chest x-ray or, you know, maybe other workup to find out what's going on with you, Mike. And he's like, well, I don't know what to do. And I said, you've got everything in the world at your fingertips. I said, we've talked about that. And he goes, not this time. He said, this time I have to listen. And I said, listen to who? He said, listen to those that tell me what to do. I said, why would anybody tell you what to do? And he said, I have to listen this time. He said, because if I don't, he said, they told me that they would stop everything. They would ruin everything. He said they would ruin everything for me. He said, as fast as they make it happen, they'd pull the rug right out from under my feet.
You mean like cancel the concert?
I asked him, I said, well, what are you saying? And he says, the same people, he said, that put this doctor here. He said, it's the same people, he said, that could destroy me.
Didn't Michael choose Dr. Conrad Murray?
No, he did not. All he did was ask if anybody, if he asked a couple of his staff members in Vegas if they knew anybody that treated like children. And they sent somebody knew this guy, and he showed up to the house. And I said, Mike, I said, a pediatrician is what you needed if your kids were sick. I said, I'm sure you know that. And he goes, yeah. He said, but you have to understand the situation. You know, can't just bring anybody here. And one of the people, he didn't exactly say who it was, he said knew, you know, that I needed a doctor for my kids because they were sick. And he goes, and this is how I met him. He says, so when I was asked later, didn't I know a doctor? He went to some older man. I don't remember what his name was, but he had treated Michael many times. But he told him, he said, Michael, he said, I can't do anything for you. Because apparently he wanted him to go like on this tour with him. And he told him, he said, I'm too old. I just can't. I'm sorry, but I can't. That's what Mike told me. And I told him, I said, I mean, you know, it's out of my realm. I wish I could have helped him, you know. And he said, and I told him, I said, well, this doctor here apparently is not doing you any good at all. And he goes, that's something you and I both know.
Did you call him Mike?
I called him Mike and Michael, sometimes a couple other things, especially when he pulled the BG thing. You know, I'm not totally innocent, but there was, I mean, he told me, you know, how he felt. He said he just didn't, on the 23rd, when I talked to him, he said he was exhausted, you know, and tired, but he was excited that I was finally saying yes to an invitation. And it was great. He was looking forward to seeing, you know, my little boy, and because he was just a baby, you know, he's only not even 3 years old, you know, and
your older son? Or
my youngest,
what happened to your older son?
He's fine. He lives in Columbus, Ohio, and he's doing great for himself. But he, you know, Michael was waiting, you know, and he was good, and he said he was going to be there until the 3rd, you know, of July, and he was going to, you know, he had to leave, of course.
Michael seemed a little weaker to you, though.
He said he was exhausted. He explained a couple of times. I guess he didn't, you know, finish, you know, rehearsal or something like that, and he felt really bad. He didn't explain exactly how he felt. He just said he just didn't feel like himself. And he said, you know, sometimes he said he didn't feel he was eating right. He said he didn't have much of an appetite, you know, and
He did have a good chef though, Kai Chase.
yeah, he had a crush on his chef.
Really?
Yeah, I told him, you know, he shared it with me, and I told him, I said, well, go ahead. Like, he's, no, I can't, like that. And I said, well, you go on your tour and come back. I said, do your thing, you know. And he laughed and giggled about it, but, you know,
Well,
he thought she was beautiful.
Why do you think he felt he couldn't with Kai Chase? Just because he's modest, or around his kids, or?
Well, it could have been a combination of all three, you know. But he was shy, you know, and he was very protective, you know, over who, you know,
Was he shy around ladies?
he was very shy,
Like,
but he was very shy,
interesting.
very shy. Just like when I met him, and he kissed me on the cheek, he blushed.
He was kind of like a gentleman from an older time.
I called him an old soul, and I call my son that, an old soul. People like gentlemen like that don't exist anymore. Not that I know of. Maybe it's because of where I live. I don't know, but me and Michael had a very great friendship. He called me his soul friend.
That's so cool.
Several times.
Well,
He loved to give gifts, you know, and stuff like that. And he wanted always, you know, pay for things. And I told him I go places, and he's like, I'll do this. I can do it. I could do it. I got my own money. I could do it. You know, but he wasn't used to that. He would call sometimes. It'd be 3 o'clock in the morning in North Carolina, and I'd be vacuuming or dusting or whatever because I didn't sleep very well, and he knew that. And one time he called and he goes, "You're always cleaning." He goes, "You know, you can get a maid." I said, "No, I don't need a maid." He said, "I can get you a maid." I said, "No, I don't. I don't need a maid. I got these. They work just fine. Meaning my hands, you know." But he picked on me, you know, and stuff. And I've always, you know, I'm my worst enemy, you know, when it comes to weight and different things that women worry about. And he would always reassure me that there was nothing wrong. I was perfectly fine to him. In his eyes, you know, I was great. And that meant, and it wasn't because of who he was. It was because that's a true friend. That's a true friend that you can talk to about everything. You can disagree. You can disagree to agree. You can agree to disagree, you know, and that's the way he was. I just wish that if I had it all back to do again, I wish I had more time. There was a lot of things that I would have said and a lot of things I would have done that I would have done differently.
Well, I really appreciate your sharing your story with me. That's really something.
Thank you.
What a story. And so can I share this on YouTube, your story?
You can share away.
Great.
I have just a little message, if I may.
Sure, please do.
Am I allowed to
Yeah, go ahead.
say the name or?
Yeah, whatever you like.
Mr. Larry, I don't know who sees this and they can believe my friendship or not, but I want to say to Mrs. Catherine Jackson, number one, I'm very sorry about Mr. Joe. He was a good man to me. No matter what happens, he's still a good man. He brought children in this world. He married a woman that he loved, and that makes him royalty to me. And that I love Michael. I didn't love Michael because of who he was or what he did for the world. I love Michael for the person he was, the friend that he was to me. And if you can find it in your heart to ever meet with me, I have some things that I would like to give to you. Some things that I promised Michael that Michael gave to me March of 2009 and just said, I want to leave this with you and I want you to do this for me if you can. And I told him, I remember just kind of jabbing him, and I said, you're fine, you're going nowhere. And he goes, well, you never know what happens. And I told him, I said, you're good, you're fine. And he goes, just promise me you'll do this. And I said, yeah. And he said, just get this to my mother. And I have tried everything in my power. But I don't want to go out and bang on nobody's gate. You know what I'm saying? Because that's not going to look very good on me. But I just need to pass some things along. That's all. If she feels that she needs to bring security, if she needs to bring a lawyer or whatever, bring them on. I just need a meeting, a few minutes, and I'm done. And what I promised is done.
And if she wanted to contact you, how could she? Like, could they contact me?
She could.
Sandy,
She could.
Sandy contact you?
She could come. She could contact you. I'll leave you my information, and whatever you need, you know. Or she could. Let's see. She could ask Trent, her nephew, that was so graciously to send me 3 tickets and 2 books in her honor. That was supposedly from her.
So he was nice to you at first, and then he was rude to you.
He was great to me. Then he was rude, and then he even had a nerve to even text me and said I was sorry. And I told him, I said, I don't want to hear from you. But he knew he told me everything. He told me everything about from driving her to New Mexico to see her son sing to when she disappeared, supposedly. You know, he told me all that. I've got emails that where he let me know that TJ had a new baby boy and they had been doing taxes. He talked. He liked to talk. But just as soon as I wouldn't tell him anything, you know, about what I had and why I wanted to meet with her, he was done. But the stunt that he pulled about the 2 coffee table books and having it wrote in there, ever who he got to do it. I would have to have her look at that and tell me that that's really her that wrote that. And I'm sure she'd remember. You know, I'm sure she would. Michael put her on a big pedestal. He loved his mother. And there's no way in this world that that man would deceive his mother through a friend. You know what I'm saying? Or whatever. She may know something about me. She may not know nothing. But all these people, Brian Oxman, Trent Jackson, all these people said, I'll help you. I'll let Miss Jackson know. Well, if they did and she knows and she doesn't feel that she wants to meet with me, that's okay. It's okay. I've reached out on social media to a couple of them and wrote them, you know, that I would like to meet Miss Jackson. Told some of them a little bit of, I have some things. Ones that I felt I could trust. But I've never heard anything. But I don't want, you know, I'm not out to make no money. I'm not out to write no book, make no movie. You know what I'm saying? I just want to do what I promised. And I'm done. I'm done. They ever want to talk to me, but she ever wants to talk to me, she can call me up anytime she wants and talk away. I wouldn't deny her that, you know, if she wanted to see what kind of person her son was friends with. But other than that, that's all I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to complete a promise.
Well, it's been a great interview. And as a last thing, what message would you give to Michael?
What would I say to him? That I miss you and that I am trying my best to complete what you ask of me. That I've done everything in my power and tried to be professional at it and tried to be sweet at it and be generous at it. And if you've got any power that you could just drop on me to make it happen any faster or make it happen any better, please do. But other than that, I miss you and the world misses you.
Wow. Great interview. Well, this is Larry Nimmer. It's June 30th, 2018. Thanks so much for the interview, Debra.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.